What's going on, YouTube? So let's just talk about the markets. Let's have some traders talk, because it's hard. It's very hard to have a space like this where we could actually talk about how we feel with the markets. And I just want you guys to do that here. So below, how do you feel about tariffs, right? Especially how when Trump came in presidency, I know in a private group, a lot of members hate how the market's been reacting ever since he got in office, right? Like, how do you feel so far the market's been going for you? Like, regardless, for me, just because of experience, right? How we feel doesn't matter, because if I feel like Trump is a pain in the ass when it comes to the markets, it's not going to matter to me because I can't move the markets know how. But the goal is to obviously learn how to adapt. But markets has changed ever since he came in office, right? And it's just about understanding that, right? So you could start adjusting your trading strategy accordingly. But a day like today, it just made me really understand how how fucked up the game is, right? When we're seeing how the banks are reacting, the news headlines are reacting, this is the typical words, right? Where Wall Street always says that history always repeats itself. That's why, like, right now, we're dealing with a transfer of wealth again, just like back in 2020. And a majority of people are going to miss it because it doesn't seem as bad as when 2020 was here, right? Because people couldn't work. So the reactions of the markets, it was easy to explain it. But as of now, we're dealing with trade wars. And I used to work at the city council, and dealing with politicians and politics, right? They're extremely smart people. They are. But they understand how to impact your emotions. They know how to make you feel one thing, right? Just like an example, it's just theater. That's all that it is. It's theater, right? That's why I like to tell you guys, this is the perfect time now to just start getting your money right, because you do not want to miss the opportunity when those buys come in for the stock markets, when we start seeing those rallies of those all-time highs, because by the time we figure it out, it's already too late, right? You want to be able to catch it when the opportunity comes. So you need to start prepping yourself so that you could get a part of that transfer of wealth, right? Don't be the person just watching buy the whole time like in 2020 and 2028, right? Because markets do repeat itself. The reactions of the markets are still the same. Nothing changes but the problem, right? So what I mean by that is, in 2008, what was the problem? It was the housing crisis, right? So if you understand that, now how did they fix that solution? And then look at what happened in 2020. What was the problem? People couldn't work. How did they fix it? So now what's the problem, right? So what's going on in the markets? How they're going to fix it? Once we can see how they're going to fix it, that's going to be the opportunity we're going to look for. But it's crazy, because when you pay attention to the banks as well, we know places like BlackRock, Vanguard, Fidelity, they control that knob, right, of boosting the economy or weakening the economy. They control that. Like, if you just look at the percent of how much BlackRock owns of the majority of the stocks in companies globally, not just in the US, you can't tell me that when Trump came into office and he was announcing tariffs, that these big players, these big whales, didn't know what was going to happen beforehand. Like, they're going to be shocked by it. Like, of course not. Of course they had probably a inside meeting before about what's going to go down, just so that they can adjust themselves accordingly for this problem, because they're the ones that control how the money fluctuate in the economy, whether we like it or not, right? And you could dive deeper into it by just looking them up. Just look at BlackRock. If you just Google it, the percentage of companies that they own, like Disney, McDonald's, you just name it, you'll see how high of the list they're up there. So that's why I mean, they know, right? So listening to like Larry Flink it's interesting. It's key because when I used to work in City Hall in New York, I used to see how the politicians play the game, and they're very good at, again, controlling our emotions, right? It's just kind of like an example, the Jake Paul and Tyson, when they fought, right? Was it Jake Paul? Not sure. It was one of those brothers, right? And when we first see that, we see Tyson hitting the bag hard. We're thinking like, oh, this guy's going to kill this kid, right? Everybody is believing the hype. And then, but behind closed doors, we don't know that the shit is fixed, right? That it's all planned. Nobody knows it. But what happens is everybody is just expecting this thing to happen, right? And then what happened when they fought? Everybody was surprised by it. They were surprised by the fact. They're like, what the hell is going on? And then at the end of it, you realize, damn, these people got a really big payday. And then you never hear from it again. And that's what's really going on now. You know, at first, everybody is in fear mode. And then once the situation of the terrorists actually happen, then we're going to realize, like, damn, it probably wasn't as bad as what they've been making it seem. And that's when the transfer of wealth has already happened. And this is what I want you guys to pay attention to, right? Because usually back in the days, it would take 10 years. It would take every decade to be able to see a drastic event happen and then the recovery. It would take 10 years. Now they're speeding up time so that we're able to see transfer of wealth happen. It just happened in 5 years. But people is not looking at it that way because it's not an actual war or people is not dying. You know, this is just dealing with trade policy. But the reactions of the markets are the same. So this is where we're able to capitalize on these events. Like, do I feel like a lot of this shit is like, is it stupid? You know, like, is it, at the end of the day, us retail traders, right? We suffer in these type of market conditions if we don't know how to adjust ourselves accordingly. But don't let fear stop you from educating yourself about what's going on. Because even like if you're completely new to what's going on in the markets, educate yourself. Learn about what's going on. Watch every single freaking movie that happened in 2020. The movies that was based off of 2008. Get yourself up to speed, right? And then once you're up to speed, by that time, you should probably be able to position yourself the right way. Because even looking at like ETFs, like looking at the stock markets, right? Individual stocks, they all are hitting all-time lows. They're not going bankrupt, you know? So this is where the opportunities for them is to catch into those lows and then hold those stock positions for the next 20 years for their next generation. So when it comes to investing, right? The stock market needed a correction. It just needed one because we haven't gotten the correction after the Fed stopped cutting rates. So the fact that now we're seeing this correction in the stock market, yeah, I do feel like it was planned. And I do feel like it was being forced, like obviously, right? Because we need a pullback. And there's no reason that we come into this new administration with Trump and then the stock market just continuously go bullish, because the stock market was bullish even during Biden's administration. But that was all because of Fed's policy, not because of physical policy, right? Not because of Trump's policy, Biden's policy. So now with tariffs, like they're putting more money into the US, because if that does happen and the US economy booms like what he says, you don't want to be at the highs, man. Like you don't want to be at all-time highs already. Like you don't want to be at Tesla when it's at $500 a share, right? You don't want to be in Apple when it's at the top of the shares, right? You want to try to get in because you know that all this shit is going to work eventually. You want to get in at the bottom and then ride it all the way to the top. Because what if we do have a booming economy after all of this? What happens if we put in manufacturers in the US and job numbers increase, people's payments increase, inflation lowers? What happens if we do have a booming economy? The correction is needed so that you could ride that wave all the way to the top, because these guys want to buy low, they want to sell high. They're selling high, but they're forcing the markets to have this recessionary fear, because there's no economic data right now, because we trade the data live every day. There's no data right now that proves that we're in a recession. Only sentiment, right? People are still buying, people are still working. So once people stop working, that's when we have to worry, right? That's where we worry, is when people stop buying, people stop working. But the correction is needed, because if you just look at it from a just a logical standpoint, why would you want to buy anything at the highs, right? Just like if you're looking at Nike, like this trade war that's impacting apparel brands, right? If you see that tariffs if they're being made in the Vietnam, right? And they're getting hit with tariffs, and the price of Nike just drops, right? Then we see whatever that country is being made from says, we're going to put 0% tariffs on the US because we don't want to deal with this. Don't you think that Nike brand is going to shoot back up, right? So that's where a lot of the opportunities is going to start coming from. And this is where paying attention to it, this is how you could catch along. But the problem is, if you try to call a bottom now, this is where a lot of people are going to get killed, so it's going to happen. The only thing we don't know is when the recovery is going to come, but we know the recovery is going to happen because we are the United States of America, right? And it's very, but even if it doesn't recover, right, we still know how to take advantage of the sells, because we're trading in a forex space, and we could buys and we could take sells too. So we will be able to capitalize on any opportunity. But the problem is, a lot of this is this is just being forced. Like the recession is being forced, right? When you listen to what the news is saying, when you listen to these banks are saying, they're purposely trying to put fear into the economy, because when people thinks that, oh shit, we are in a recession, let me not buy these goods no more, and let me just go back in saving mode. Because once people start feeling like it's a recession, emotionally people would stop spending money, and that's when the recession is forced. That's why the news keep playing those type of headlines. So that's what we have to focus on, right? So moving forward, guys, tell me how you guys feel, with all of this. Like, I feel like it is being forced, right? Rather it's being forced or not, it doesn't matter. We know how to take advantage of it, but we see how they like to play with us. They make it seem like they like to dangle something up here, but like, hey, look over here. And then over there, nobody's paying attention to what's happening over there, right? And you have to be visual, because these people are smart. They're not dumb. They know exactly what they're doing, right? So we just have to think outside the box, right? And just remain calm, while the majority of people that don't know this information, they're panicking. They don't know what's going on. They're not investing. A lot of people are losing a lot of money in their 401ks and investment accounts, right? Because they can't adapt to it. You have to learn to adapt to the markets, because even just think about this before I go. When we had those recessionary fears that came into the markets, the only time we saw a bank had a failure was I believe it was Lehman, right? In 2008. But they made it happen. They needed a bank to fail just so that they could make an example, right? But 2020, what bank failed? Right? So that shows that they position themselves for these opportunities. But who suffers the most? People. But it's only because we don't educate ourselves in this information. So hopefully this was helpful, guys. Let me know how you like it. Comment, like, subscribe, and I will do another one for you guys.